Hi everyone, this is Toby from the International Association for Political Science Students. We're here live today again from San Francisco at the annual convention of the International Studies Association. Right now I'm here with Adam Hoffman from the Rothberg International School of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I'm very glad to have you here today.
Likewise, thanks for inviting me.
We're talking today about your current research, which is on legitimizing the Caliphate, ISIS, Jihadi media, and politics of legitimacy. And I want to ask you first something that directly came into my eye when I read about your research. You're referring to jihadi soft power in one of your papers. Can you tell me a bit more what you're referring to, if you
Okay.
think of this?
Thank you. This is actually based on a paper presented at ISA last year at a conference, and basically I applied a nice concept of soft power to the Dawah activities, the proselytization, the mission activity undertaken by both ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, the Salafi jihad groups that we know mainly from the Syrian civil war. And I showed, based on an analysis of these Dawah videos, which were published by both groups since early 2014, that these groups engage not just in violence and in fighting, or in the case of ISIS also in brutalities and terrorism, but also in carrying out these kind of soft power activities of religious outreach, of organizing these Dawah forums, these all family-friendly events for kids and families, and trying to create this kind of popular support or appearance of popular support among these local populations in Iraq and Syria. And I think this is an understudied and largely unfamiliar aspect of what ISIS does, mainly because these are videos in Arabic and they're targeted mainly at the local population there. So it's not really something which should concern Western audiences, and ISIS is very keen on letting the West know them only through the prism of war fighting and terrorism. So that's the kind of message that they would like us to have about them, but they're also trying to create strategies which will create for them popular support also among their local populations in Iraq and Syria. And I think we should be much more aware of these kind of activities, much more familiar with them, than focusing only on the beheading videos and the atrocities carried by ISIS.
Before moving to the next question, I again want to encourage all of you, of course, also to raise your questions. If you have any, please feel free to just write them in the comment bar. We have just mentioned soft power, which was the topic last year. Now it is legitimization, which is kind of the bow that you spent from the last year to this year.
Yes.
So how did you evolve your interest, and what is the legitimization part about this year?
Okay, so yeah, there's certainly been an evolution in my thinking about ISIS and the role that the media plays in this process. I mean, last year the media for me was largely invisible. I mean, I studied jihadi videos, but I was not really focused on what the media does for ISIS. And today in this conference this year, I'm much more focused on why ISIS tries to create legitimacy and what role the media plays in that kind of process. So the paper presented here just a few hours ago, I actually talked about 4 different types of legitimacy that ISIS is trying to cultivate. So first of all, let's start with the fact that I believe that ISIS is trying to build some legitimacy. That ISIS cares about its image, mainly among the Sunni Muslim population, the global one, the Ummah, but also among other either local or global audiences. So, and this goes against some of the conventional thinking we have on ISIS, because according to some scholars, some of the top scholars on ISIS, such as Peter Newman from ICSR and Franz Georges from LSE and others, so ISIS doesn't really care about legitimacy in the first place. It's only about brutality, it's only about coercion. And I think that's a slightly mistaken view of how we should understand ISIS, because ISIS certainly comes with a hard power approach of, first of all, overtaking territory and brutalizing the local population. But afterwards, in that kind of process, they are trying to create some kind of legitimacy for their actions, for their political project. And I think that when we speak of legitimacy in the case of ISIS, we should be aware of why they want to create legitimacy for themselves in the first place. And that's because, as I said, there's a very big gap between where ISIS is, or even has been in its glory days of 2014, after its caliphate declaration and where it would like to be. Because ISIS would ideally like to unite the entire Ummah, the global Muslim community, Sunnis all over the world under its black banners, under its authority, and claims to have done so. I mean, in its Caliphate declaration, it has claimed that all of the Muslims in Iraq, all of those living in ISIS territories, have pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, and supported. I mean, Muslims more worldwide have supported ISIS. That's of course, a far-fetched claim. There have been some pledges of allegiance, but nothing which comes with what ISIS is trying to do. But ISIS is trying to bridge that kind of gap between where it is, where it was, to where between where it would like to be in this kind of ideal scenario. So it is trying to get legitimacy, but it's different types of legitimacy among different audiences. The first and most obvious type is legitimacy, which I call in-group legitimacy, and that's how they try to broadcast this kind of sense of legitimacy among ISIS fighters. So basically saying that, for example, after its Caliphate declaration, after its first year of ruling Mosul, that ISIS fighters in Iraq and also elsewhere have been rejoiced with the news of ISIS governing a city, and everything is fantastic, everything is wonderful. Look at how we're implementing Islam, all that. So this is something which it's obvious why ISIS would like to do so, but this is also the most easy to explain, because if you're an ISIS fighter, it makes sense that you also believe in its legitimacy and support it, because otherwise you wouldn't be there in the first place. So this is really not too difficult to go on about, but it's the first type of legitimacy which I see. The second kind of type I talk about local legitimacy, and this is basically ISIS trying to present itself as a force of justice and order stability, but also justified order in Iraq and Syria, and territories being controlled in 2014, 2015. And the function of that legitimacy is not so much to create social, popular support, as so much to create social control. I mean, once you don't need only coercion, and you could also have the compliance of the local population, so governance becomes much easier, as we know also from other political contexts. This might be comparable to totalitarian contexts, in which you have extensive use of propaganda for social control. But this is something which primarily concerned what ISIS did in Iraq and Syria in the local arenas, where it actually governed territory. And interestingly, a lot of the propaganda was mainly offline propaganda. It was mainly printed brochures, magazines, which they downloaded from their computers and printed in hard copies, and also some videos which they invited or even forced the local populations there to watch in these kind of fixed ISIS settings called the media points. Okay, so we had something which is between social control, indoctrination, but an attempt to create this kind of legitimacy among local populations of Iraq and Syria. And then you have the third type, which could be thought of as a transnational legitimacy for ISIS among the Ummah, among the global Muslim community. This is far more ambitious. This is something which ISIS attempted to do in different ways from very early stage in 2014, including social media and Twitter campaigns, in videos, in Dabik, and all kinds of images which were supposed to show the strength and unity and joy of Muslims worldwide thanks to the emergence of ISIS. But this has been largely a one-sided attempt, and we've seen a lot of pushback against ISIS by religious leaders, by politicians, by community leaders, both in the Muslim world and also from Muslims living in the West. So this was not something which ISIS could consider a success, but it's at the same time it's very much important to ISIS to portray itself as the as the leader, the true leader of the Ummah and the true force of Islam today. And the media is used also to try to promote that kind of image. The fourth and final category, which I'm still trying to figure out exactly how it should be called, is basically how ISIS tries to shape its image among non-Muslim audiences beyond the Middle East. So basically Western powers, so the United States, Europe, United Kingdom. So here, of course, it's not like ISIS is asking Obama at the time, Trump today, to endorse the caliphate, of course, and to start to support it, but it does seek the recognition of the United States to its caliphate project. So, for example, in several of the beheading videos. So some of the executed hostages and Jihadi John said something like of, we're a real state now. We're in state with the army of Islam, and we have our sovereignty now. So everything you do against us really impairs that sovereignty. And this is an attack on the Islamic State, not just we're not another group. So what's something which you understand about ISIS is that it's really fundamental to them to stress that you're not just yet another jihadi group like Al-Qaeda, like all the other jihadi factions you've had and still have in Syria, but we're in a state, an Islamic State, and this perception of a state also shapes how it really tries to engage with external audiences because it sees itself as a state. So it's not exactly legitimacy. I could say that this might be seen as the jihadi struggle for recognition, explicitly targeted at non-Muslim audiences. But yet again, here the media is critical for shaping the perceptions of ISIS as a powerful force and something which appears to be a state, to work like a state. So it also showcases some of the governance activities and how everything is thriving in the Islamic State at the time, 2 years ago, and tries to really normalize the image of ISIS as a functioning bureaucracy, as a capable state, but a state which is, of course, not a nation state because ISIS rejects nationalism, not a liberal state, not a democratic state, but an Islamic state which has the capacity of a state under the black flag of ISIS.
Mm-hmm. You have drawn upon a lot of things right now, and I want to draw our attention right now to two things that I found particularly interesting, which is first the goals of the legitimacy, and second the platforms that I used in the context, and research on other groups as well. And can you maybe draw a comparison to other groups? How are they different? For example, you've studied on Al-Qaeda as well. How are other groups different in the goals of legitimacy, how they pursue legitimacy, and then the platforms that they use?
That's a great question, because comparing Al-Qaeda to ISIS is at the same time both a natural comparison, because Al-Qaeda being the leader of the global jihadi movement for a long time, and also ISIS originally emerged out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and as an Al-Qaeda franchise, but at the same time, because of differences both on the ground in the Middle East post the Arab Spring era, and also in technology, we're talking about two very different types of actors, which seem to be, they are part of the same ideological current of the Salafi jihadi movement, but they're very different in terms of their characteristics and their political behavior. And especially when you look at the media, you see these kind of differences. But regarding legitimacy, Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden himself, and Ayman Zawahiri were always concerned with the question of legitimacy, and they always sought to win the vote of the median Arab voter, to win over the support of the Al Jazeera viewer. Basically the mainstream public opinion in the Arab world, and they were always concerned with those kind of issues. And for example, they issued warnings to Abu Musab al-Zarqawi from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, later on ISIS, to cut back on the beheading videos, because that makes Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Al-Qaeda in general and Islam in general even look very bad. Okay, so be much more aware of the publicity side of things, and to win the support of the Ummah, of the hearts and minds of the Ummah, in order to make ISIS, to make Al-Qaeda more popular, more closer to the Arab mainstream than was the case at the time. And ISIS, was aware of these kind of lessons, but it went in the exact opposite direction. So while both jihadi groups are very aware of the publicity concerns, I think that Al-Qaeda back then, more than a decade ago, and still today, is much more focused on winning the support of the mainstream public opinion in Syria, for example, with Jabhat al-Nusra, and also more broadly, while ISIS is much more focused on the jihadists first, and then the Ummah, and then external audiences. So it engages with different audiences in different ways, and the media plays a major part in how it really tries to communicate and to frame these different messages and different mediums to meet different audiences.
I'd be interested then. There are two ways of constructing not only legitimacy or to defending legitimacy with other people, but also to construct and reconstruct identity, which is on the one hand an inclusive way of identity, that we construct identity through saying, "Hey, you belong to us." The other way is to create identity through saying, "Hey, they don't belong to us, and so therefore you are a part of us." How do you feel about like analyzing the legitimization strategies? What of these two narratives is ISIS drawing more upon?
Well, this is actually an excellent question, which I didn't have time to cover in my presentation and conference today. But the link between identity and legitimacy is very clear in the case of ISIS, because ISIS basically bases its demands or needs for legitimacy on identity. I mean, the four categories I mentioned earlier are based on identity. If you're a Sunni Muslim and you're a Sunni Muslim jihadi, so of course you would be part of the core constituency of ISIS. If you're not a member yet, so you might become a member in a very short future. And if you're a Sunni Muslim more generally and you're not a jihadist, you might be, persuaded to endorse ISIS as an idea, as a state-building project, if not actually, joining ranks militarily. And anyone who isn't a Sunni Muslim and anyone who isn't part of this camp, and also crucially, anyone who is also a Sunni Muslim but doesn't accept the theology, the very extreme theology of ISIS, is automatically part of this outgroup. Okay, so for example, Shia, Christians, of course, Yazidis, as we know, which ISIS carried horrible atrocities against them, are completely not part of this spectrum, so they're not entitled to any form of protection. But anyone who is not part of this Sunni Muslim hardcore defined identity is part of the outgroup. So it's also a matter of identity, also a matter of geography. Okay, for example, the Western public opinion here would be the Crusaders, according to ISIS. So they're both non-Muslims and also a part of this historical enemy which is constructed. So identity plays a very big part in how ISIS, sees these the different groups of legitimacy. But it's not only about identity. It's also trying to create cohesion among different groups and try to mainly, ISIS is interesting because it's at the same time both an exclusive and inclusive case, because it rejects any other form rather than being a Sunni Muslim. But to those who aren't Sunni Muslims, in Elysian's propaganda, theoretically, it projected a very inclusive vision of society, especially in 2014, once it's declared the Caliphate in June. So since then, they just said that all Muslims can join here, men, women, both old and young, children as well, not just fighters. And this is actually a critical difference compared to Al-Qaeda, going back to your question before, because Al-Qaeda was also always looking only for fighters. Okay, Al-Qaeda was focused on operations, and it was a very elite club to belong to. Okay, it could be, compared to U.S. Special Forces, or in Israel would be comparison to Sayed Matkal or something. Some estimates would put it that after 9/11, Al-Qaeda had some like 400 fighters. Okay, so you had to travel to Afghanistan, you had to carry a letter of recommendation, you had to be vetted and approved by several members of Al-Qaeda, both, maybe in Europe or in Egypt or whatever, and also again in Afghanistan. It was a very long, very selective process of who could be actually a formal member of Al-Qaeda. And ISIS, on the other hand, projected a very different story of recruitment, that anything goes. You can come here as long as you want to be part of the Caliphate, part of the Islamic State. Come here, we have a place for you, you have a house, you can have, if you're a male, you can have a wife here and enjoy some property. If you're a wife, if you're a woman, you can find a husband for you. We'll take care of all of your material needs. Just come and join the Caliphate. And anything goes, and this was the kind of approach. And this was very much of an inclusive invitation to participate in the state-building projects, especially in 2014 and 2015. And this is a very different kind of messaging strategy than we've seen in the case of Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm. And
hopefully to answer the question.
No, definitely. I'm just getting curious, thinking about the development over time, because of course, especially ISIS, and it must be a special case probably, is coming from a point where it was a pure terrorist organization, and then at a certain point really had some territories under control, had cities under control, was governing governing a certain land.
Yeah.
So it
and then it lost it.
Yeah, and then it lost it.
Yeah.
Did this development of also kind of course it created a different identity. How did it change the narratives of how it legitimized itself from this position?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you look at the earliest origins of ISIS, I mean, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and then Islamic State in Iraq in 2006, after the Zarqawi's death, then to my understanding, there were no concerns of legitimacy at this time, because it was only about the members of this group, only about the jihadists there in Iraq, and there was no attempt to broaden the ranks beyond the group itself. But once you had control of territory, which should not be underestimated, because what ISIS did with conquering Mosul in early June and other cities, I mean, controlled a third of the territory of Iraq. And this was an unparalleled achievement in the history of the jihadi movement. I mean, jihadis have controlled some territories before, such as in Yemen, in Northern Africa, some local Al-Qaeda affiliates, but nothing as extensive as a city of 2 million citizens, or something comparable to what ISIS has done. So this really created a new equation for ISIS, and on one hand created an image of strength, which was somewhat justified, because ISIS managed, not only through military force, but also thanks to playing politics and manipulating the local population, but it did manage at the end of the day to control such a vast city, such territory, as well as overtake some military equipment from Iraq. But at the same time, also need to expand ranks, to create this mass mobilization to fill the positions necessary for running a state, for running and administering this kind of territory. So we had to recalibrate the message and to appeal now to a much broader constituency, which at the same time both fill the needs for governance on a very technical level, but also importantly for ISIS, also validate claims for religious authority. I mean, if you join ISIS from Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and you travel to the Caliphate, the so-called Caliphate, and join ISIS, you at the same time both fill the manpower needs of a new emergent force, between a jihadi group and a state building project. And at the same time, you also validate these claims for religious authority, because you come there because you believe it's in its legitimacy, you believe that it is really the true Islamic State, that it implements Islam correctly, that you are willing to fight and die for its ideas. So by recruiting, by creating this very inclusive messaging, which was also targeted at Canadians, Americans, Britons, there was one recruitment video which was made by British jihadis, saying that I know the depression in your heart. I was there in the UK, and my brother's jihad is a cure for depression. Okay, come here, come to Asham. Asham, Syria was the promised land of jihad and the miracles. We have everything you need. Just come and join us here, and everything will be fine for your personal lives, both spiritually and materially. So there was different messages at different audiences, but it played on the same themes of both the material and the spiritual needs. And my argument is that all of these different messages were ultimately aimed at bolstering the legitimacy of ISIS, because the more people come, especially from afar, as we've had with the whole foreign fighter mobilization, it validated ISIS' claims to be a legitimate actor, both in the jihadi movement and also worldwide, because you can see that so many people, old and young people from Australia, from the UK, from Belgium, from Holland, Denmark, whatever, Canada, also traveled to Syria to join ISIS and play the state building project. And this kind of mobilization was unprecedented. It surpassed what we've seen in the case of the Afghan jihad in the 1980s and later jihadist insurgency. So it was something which was so massive that it created a sense of strength and momentum for ISIS, which I think largely validated, at least at the time, its claims to be a legitimate actor in the jihadi movement. I hope it wasn't too long an answer.
No, it wasn't. Definitely not. I'm just getting that we more get around the picture. I'm just wondering, how does this research interest that you have play into your broader motivation, let's say? So what is this part of a larger research project right
Yeah.
now, or where do you aim to go with this research, and what is your inner drive for doing so?
Okay, well, what I presented last year on Jihadi so far was just a small research project, which I thought that ISA would be a fantastic opportunity to present it, and it was. I was very lucky to present in this forum. And what I presented this year on Jihadi media and legitimacy was already part of my PhD, and would hopefully be written and published soon as part of my PhD as an article. So this is really a new project which tries to combine different aspects from IR, mainly on non-state actors and legitimacy, which is more of a new research interest, but I think we've seen a lot of interesting findings there so far, so I hope to contribute to that literature. And of course, some terrorism studies and media studies, and how really the media plays a role in creating that kind of legitimacy. And more broadly speaking, I think that what I'm trying to do for quite a while, also wrote my MA thesis on Al-Qaeda and the impact of political exile and the emergence of early Al-Qaeda, is try to understand the global jihad, and specifically organization within global jihad as political actors, not just as violent fanatics, which are irrational in their approach and seek to just be a death cult seeking death and destruction, but also political actors who have very clear aims, very clear political and religious goals, and trying to advance kind of goals. So I'm not trying to give them legitimacy, going back to the title of this panel, but I am trying to present a more holistic understanding of what they are and what kind of political imperatives and social constraints, and trying to respond to both online and offline, and how they really try to adapt their strategies, the political strategies of legitimization, of communication, and also fighting in response to emerging problems and challenges on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my motivation.
Adam Hoffman, thank you very much for being here today. It was really nice to get an insight into all these different parts of your research, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much
for here and for later.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for?
No, we are done.
Okay.
Right
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.